today on behalf of all of my sisters. And thank you for coming, and I hope to see you at another workshop.
I think Sir Marquita is reminding me that it's my turn to go. Hi, I'm Dina Hardison. I am the president of Cairo Omega Chapter, and I am just so glad to see you all here today learning about FAFSA, all things basics, and all things to try to complete the form. As a parent of a high school senior and a high school sophomore, I'm looking forward to getting this information. The first time we tried to fill it out, I think I was stressed out and had to take a step back. But I am grateful for this opportunity to get some information and to learn how to complete this form and to get my questions answered, because I do have several. I want to say that our hashtag CAP program is short for college admissions process. And the whole point of our program is to help students get the tools they need to successfully apply and be accepted into college. So I am delighted that this first program is helping us tackle one thing that's important about going to college, and that is finances. Being able to complete a form, understanding what money is available to you so that you can select a school that may fit your budget. So thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to learning a lot about FAFSA and all things about it. Thank you.
Jenna Keith is a proud Tar Heel with more than 5 years of experience in higher education. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2014, and Master of Education in Higher Education from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington in 2018. Jenna currently serves as the Student Awards and Funding Coordinator for the Gillings School of Public Health at UNC, where she oversees current and prospective student funding and counsels students on internal and external scholarship opportunities. Prior to joining Gillings, Jenna served as Scholarship Coordinator at UNC Wilmington 4 years, where she managed outside and institutional scholarship payments and served as a liaison between UNCW and local and state scholarship entities. Jenna is the native of Curry, North Carolina, and is a member of Alpha Psi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, located in Wilmington, North Carolina. I now present to you, Ms. Jenna Keith.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all again for the invitation and that wonderful introduction. Hope everyone's having a great start to their Saturday so far. I'm here to share a few FAFSA basics with you and go over some financial aid 101 so you'll know what funding opportunities are out there for college. So to give you an overview of what we'll talk about today, we'll talk a little bit about FAFSA basics, the different types of aid that are available, financial aid and scholarship resources, and budgeting for college. So to get started with FAFSA basics, the FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So you can apply for any federal money that's out there at no cost. The FAFSA is used to award federal, state, and university funds, and it opens on October 1st each year and must be completed annually. So go ahead and take your phone out and on your calendar, make a note that when October 1st rolls around again, you will need to complete a new FAFSA for the next academic year. Both the student and the parent will need an FSA ID, so you'll need to create that, and that's just the username and password that's required to sign off on the FAFSA electronically. You should try to submit your information early between October and December of each year. And that's because a lot of free money that's out there in terms of state grants and institutional grants may be awarded first come, first serve. So if you apply early, it's more likely that more free money will be out there for you. But if you don't complete it between October and December, it's not the end of the world. The FAFSA will still be open for another year and a half or so. So you'll still have plenty of time to apply for aid. And you should follow up with your schools of interest to see if they have any priority deadlines for institutional aid. Some may ask that you complete the FAFSA by January 1st. Some may say March 1st, or some may not have a deadline at all for institutional aid. So you'll just want to keep that in mind. So there are a few basic eligibility requirements for federal aid. You must have a high school diploma, GED, or have completed homeschooling. You must have a social security number with limited exceptions. And you must have US citizenship or be an eligible non-citizen. Young men, once you turn 18, you will need to register with the Selective Service. That's a short process that can be completed at sss.gov, or when you complete the FAFSA, you can select Register Me Now for the Selective Service. And the Selective Service is just basically if the United States were to go to war again, your name would need to be in the system for a military draft, but that hasn't been used for a very long time, so I wouldn't be alarmed about completing that process. And you must be enrolled or accepted for enrollment in an eligible program and be pursuing a degree, certificate, or credential. You must maintain satisfactory academic progress. You'll hear your school refer to it as SAP. And there are a few different factors that go into that, but for you all, you really just need to worry about keeping your GPA above 2.0. So if your GPA drops below 2.0 your first semester, your school may send you a message and say, hey, this is just a notification. You have another semester to pull your GPA above 2.0 to maintain your eligibility for aid. You will need to enroll at least half-time for direct loan funds. So usually that means 6 credit hours or 2 classes. This usually is important. If you were to take summer classes, you would need to enroll in a couple of classes to meet that half-time requirement for your loans to disperse. And you can find more details on these requirements at studentaid.gov. So when you prepare for the FAFSA will ask a few questions about you and your finances, so you'll need the following information. If you get started and realize you're missing a document, that's perfectly fine. You can save it. You can get started, save it, and come back and complete it later. So again, you'll need your social security number or alien registration number. You'll need your federal tax information and tax returns and any records of untaxed income that you received. So it's important to remember that the FAFSA will go back a couple of years when collecting your tax information. So the 2021-22 FAFSA is looking at 2019's tax information, and the new FAFSA that opens in October would look at 2020's tax information. So you'll just want to keep that in mind so you'll have the correct documents. You will need your cash, savings, and checking account balances and records of investments other than the home in which you live. So to get started with the FAFSA, you'd visit studentaid.gov. They have a section that says apply for aid. If you are new to the FAFSA process, you click start here, create your FSA ID, and follow the prompts. If you're a returning user, you can click log in, correct any information, add a school, and view your student aid report that's generated once your FAFSA is submitted. There is a mobile app that's available to help you complete your FAFSA now, and a mail-in form is available. So if you don't want to complete it electronically, there is the paper form. But since the mail has been a little slow the last few months, I wouldn't recommend mailing that in. I would complete it electronically so your school can get your information as soon as possible. So to give you an overview of the types of information collected from the FAFSA, when you get started, it'll be pretty straightforward. It'll ask some basic information about you, such as your name, your address, your citizenship status, your marital status, your education level, and household information, such as the number of people that live in your household. It'll determine your dependency status. If you're a dependent student, you'll need to provide your parents' information as well. But if you were classified as an independent student, your parents' information wouldn't be needed. It will ask, again, your wage and income information for students and parents, but parents' information wouldn't be needed for independent students. And you can select the schools that you want to receive your information. You can always go in and add or remove schools later, but you must list at least one when you submit your FAFSA. And FAFSA has been streamlined quite a bit over the last few years. So if you have all of your information handy, it can be completed in about 30 minutes. So if any of the following criteria applies, you would be considered independent and wouldn't need to provide your parents' information. So once you turn 24, if you were to get married, after you graduate, if you return to graduate school and pursue a master's or doctoral degree, you'd be considered independent. If you were to have children and you provide half of their support, if you've been in foster care since turning 13, if you're considered an emancipated minor, if you currently were or are in legal guardianship, if you're homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless, or if you are a veteran or serving active duty in the military. But if none of those criteria apply, you would be considered dependent and your parents' information would be needed. So of course, there are special circumstances. Everyone may not be able to provide their parents' information. So you should follow up with your schools of interest if you have any questions on their special circumstances process. So some examples are if your parents are incarcerated, if you left home due to an abusive family environment, or if you're unsure of your parents' whereabouts. And again, since the FAFSA goes back a couple of years with tax and income information, since COVID happened, everyone's income may not be the same as it was a couple of years ago. So you'll just want to document your circumstances, submit those to the financial aid office. They may have a short form that you'll need to complete along with that, but they'll ultimately have final say and exercise professional judgment and let you know what additional information they may need to recalculate your awards. So again, everyone's circumstances are different, so it may not always be clear who is your parent when you fill out your FAFSA. So if your parents are married to each other, pretty straightforward, you would report the information for both. If your parents aren't married but live together, you would report the information for both parents, even if they were never married. If you lived with one parent more than the other for the last 12 months, you would report the information for the parent you live with more or the parent who provided the most financial support. And if your parent has remarried, you would also need to report your step-parents' information on the FAFSA. So the following people are not your parents unless they've legally adopted you. So a widowed step-parent, your grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, older brothers or sisters, or aunts and uncles. But if you're still not sure who to report as your parent, you can visit studentaid.gov, or there's a help number that you can call. The IRS data retrieval tool is a helpful tool in the FAFSA that'll let you transfer your tax information directly into the form. It may take a couple of weeks for your information to become available in the database, but this is the easiest way to provide your tax information, but it's not required. So if you have all of your documents and still prefer to enter that in manually, you still have that option. Okay, after you fill in your information, your FAFSA is completed, it'll be received by the colleges. They'll review the information and create an award package for you. And at that point, you can compare your award letters from different schools. You should check your email and regular mail for updates. Sometimes you may be asked to submit additional documents for a process known as verification. If you get an alert saying you've been selected for verification, don't be alarmed. It's not necessarily that you did anything wrong. A lot of times the federal government will just randomly select students just to be sure the information that you have and the information that's in the system checks out. So your school may ask you to complete a short form or maybe send a copy of your W-2 or another document, but usually verification can be completed within a couple of business days. You can update and make corrections to your FAFSA if necessary, and be proactive and follow up with your schools for the award letter. If you get into late March, early April, and you still haven't heard anything from your school, you may want to follow up with them to see what their timeline will be and when you can expect your award letter, and be sure they didn't need any additional information from you. And you can look for scholarships, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. And again, this graphic just kind of gives you an overview of the processing timeline. After you submit your FAFSA, you'll receive an email letting you know that your FAFSA was received and processed. You'll receive an aid offer from each college you applied to, and you can compare your award offers at that point, make the decision that's best for you, and you can accept the school's award offer. The CSS profile, I won't talk about as much. Some schools use it, some schools don't, but it's used by nearly 400 colleges and universities to award non-federal aid, such as scholarships. So you should follow up with their schools of interest to see if it's a requirement. Like the FAFSA, the CSS profile will open on October 1st. The initial application fee is $25, and additional reports are $16, but fee waivers are available for this. Should sign in with your College Board username, similar to the username you created for your SAT and AP scores. And it'll also use tax returns and financial information like the FAFSA. So if the FAFSA is using 2019 tax information, the CSS profile would do the same. And help is provided within the application via chat, phone, and email. North Carolina Residency Determination Service, another important step. You must apply for a North Carolina residency via RDS to qualify for in-state tuition, state grants, and more. So you can apply directly at ncresidency.org from your CFNC account or directly from your admissions application. And this impacts the calculation of your cost of attendance and your financial aid package. So if you don't go in and confirm that you're a North Carolina resident, you'll automatically be packaged as an out-of-state student, and you would be billed out-of-state tuition. So that can make a difference in tens of thousands of dollars at times. So you don't want to take on that burden if you don't have to. So you just want to be sure you get your residency information in. So there are a few different sources where you can receive money for college. The federal government has grants, loans, and work study. The state of North Carolina has state grants, a couple loan programs, and scholarships. Your individual colleges and universities may have institutional grants, institutional loans, and scholarships. And you have your private foundations, your employers and private companies, and professional and service organizations in your community, like your fraternities and sororities and other service groups. So once you complete the FAFSA, there are three main types of federal student aid that will be awarded. So there are grants, which are free money, loans, which are borrowed money, and work study, which is earned money. And we'll talk a little bit more about each. Grants are everyone's favorite, the free money that does not have to be repaid. So you'll have the Pell Grant, which is need-based. The maximum amount for it right now is about $6,000 or so. The Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, you'll see it abbreviated as FSEOG. It's also need-based, and it can be about $3,000 or $4,000 or so. If you're interested in going to school to become an elementary or secondary school teacher, you may qualify for the TEACH grant. And to receive this, you must agree to teach in a high need field at a low income school for at least 4 years after graduation. And if you don't live up to that agreement, the grant would be converted into a loan. If any of you had a parent or guardian who died after the events of 9/11 or as a result of military service in Iraq or Afghanistan, you may qualify for the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant. And if you had a parent or guardian in the armed forces, you may want to follow up to see what VA benefits you may qualify for. So you just want to follow up with the VA certifying official at the school to see what types of benefits are available. Loans, again, are borrowed money, which must be repaid with interest. So there is the subsidized loan. Interest is paid by the Department of Education while you're in school and during periods of deferment. The unsubsidized loan, you'll be responsible for all interest with that loan. So once that loan disperses to your account in August, it will begin generating interest right away. So you'll just want to keep that in mind. The Direct Plus loan for you all would be more so in the form of a Parent Plus loan. Again, the borrower is responsible for all interest with this. And compared to private loans, your federal loans will often have lower fixed interest rates, more flexible repayment options, and other benefits you may not necessarily find elsewhere. Work study is a great opportunity. This money wouldn't necessarily be applied to your account. You would earn this in the form of a paycheck. You could get a job on campus or sometimes in the local community. And this is a great way to get job experience for your resume. I've known people who've been able to turn their work study jobs into a full-time position after graduation. So when you complete the FAFSA, it'll ask if you want to be considered for work study. I'd recommend saying yes, because you may come across a great job opportunity. And again, here's another breakdown of subsidized versus unsubsidized loans. Usually subsidized is the better of the two because the government pays the interest while you're in college and during other eligible periods. The subsidized loan is need-based, whereas the unsubsidized loan is not need-based. Both loans have a fixed interest rate. The subsidized loan is available only to undergraduate students, whereas the unsubsidized loan, if you wanted to go to graduate school later, you would still qualify for this one. Subsidized loans will be awarded in amounts up to $5,500. Unsubsidized loans can be awarded up to $20,500, but usually the $20,000 amount is more so reserved for graduate students. And each year that you're in school, you'll qualify for a little bit more in loans each year. So here's an overview of how the student loan interest rates typically look. As you can see, the Stafford direct loan interest rate is typically lower than the PLUS loan and private loan. You'd begin repayment 6 months after separation from school. The PLUS loans can be deferred until 6 months after you drop below half time or 60 days after the loan is fully dispersed. Your private loans will really vary by lender, so you'll want to do your research and see which loan option is the best for you. Right now, federal loan interest rates are at 0% due to COVID-19 relief. Since we have a new administration, you'll want to keep an eye on this to see how interest rates and their repayment options will change once COVID's over. And, you'll just want to keep that in mind if you decide to accept student loans. Okay, so we'll talk about calculating your cost of attendance to help you budget for the estimated costs each year. So when you visit your school's website, you might see that it'll cost $25,000 to attend that university each year. But it will not necessarily cost $25,000 to attend that school. And there are a few different factors that go into that cost of attendance numbers. So you'll want to kind of plug in the numbers that are more accurate for you to kind of calculate your more accurate costs. So you have your tuition and fees. Usually those are set amounts determined by the university, and those usually won't change. Your room and board amounts will vary based on where you choose to live on campus. If you decide to have a meal plan, some options are cheaper than others. If you decide to accept a student loan, a small amount of that will be taken out in loan fees. Your books and supply costs will vary based on where you choose to purchase your books and supplies. Again, some costs are cheaper than others. Student health insurance will be billed to your account, but if you have your own insurance or you're still on your parents' health insurance, you can waive that cost and save at least $1,000 there. Transportation costs will vary based on how far you are from campus, how you'll choose to get there. Some schools have free campus shuttles. And there are the various personal expenses you may have for moving around on campus or living in your dorm. So when you complete your FAFSA, it'll take the parents' information and the student's information and calculate a number known as the expected family contribution, or EFC. So your EFC will be subtracted from that $25,000 cost of attendance number, and it will determine your financial need. So your financial need number will determine how much you're eligible for in Pell Grants, subsidized loans, any of the funds that are based on financial need. And here's an example of cost of attendance. This is UNC's cost of attendance for the year. And again, it kind of has that same breakdown: tuition, fees, housing, meals, and so on. But if you were to live at home with family, for example, you'll see that you can take that $6,000 housing cost down to $2,000 or less. And that reduces your cost of attendance from $25,000 to maybe $19,000 or so. So again, you'll just want to go through these categories, plug in your costs, and calculate a more accurate cost of attendance from there. And here's an example of an award letter that you may receive. It may be determined that your financial need is $18,000 that you may have to make up the difference for. So you could receive $6,000 in scholarships, $2,000 in institutional grants, $5,000 in federal grants, $2,000 in state grants, and $2,000 in unsubsidized loans. And that'll bring that $18,000 down to just $1,000 that you may have to make up the difference for. And you may even find another $1,000 scholarship to cover that cost. So let's talk a little bit about budgeting and saving tips. You should always, always, always prepare for unexpected expenses. So this time last year, none of us could have predicted that COVID-19 would happen. But when everything started shutting down, a lot of students had to return home all of a sudden, and there's paying for transportation home, paying for storage for your belongings, and a lot of people weren't prepared for those costs. When I was working at UNCW, Hurricane Florence came in, students had to evacuate campus and go home for a few weeks. And again, a lot of students weren't prepared for that. So you'll always want to prepare for the unexpected. Use budgeting tools to create a monthly or annual budget. CFNC has a few budgeting tools, College Board has budgeting tools, and your individual schools may have budget calculators as well. Review updated cost of attendance numbers each year. Usually it won't change drastically, but you want to keep an eye out for any changes in tuition or fees or meal plans or housing costs. Don't accept full amounts of loans unless they are needed. So just because your school offers you $5,000 in loans does not mean that you need to accept $5,000 in loans if you don't need it. Sometimes people will look at that $25,000 cost of attendance and think they need to take out a loan for that much money, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. You don't want to get into a lot of debt if you don't have to. I'd recommend, if you have the option, to kind of hold off on accepting your loans until you get your bill and see how much you'll have to make up the difference for, and accept small amounts of the loans at that point. You can always go in later, ask your financial aid office to increase the amount of loans that you'll need. You should rent or buy used textbooks when possible. A lot of people want brand new textbooks and will buy those from the campus bookstore, but you may be able to find a cheaper option. Sometimes students who have taken the classes already may be selling their textbooks for a cheaper cost than you can find at the bookstore. So you want to keep that in mind. Think about where extra costs can be avoided. So can a meal plan be avoided? Some schools require them, some schools don't. Are there cheaper housing or transportation options? Again, some schools like UNC have free campus shuttles. One of the best things about being a college student will be the student discounts. So when you get your student ID, you may see that restaurants have student discounts. Some bookstores may have student discounts. When movie theaters are back open, they may have discounts for students. And it's not just limited to entertainment. Some electronic stores like Best Buy had a student discount at one point, and they may still have that. So you'll want to look into those. And save as much as possible from different sources: your refunds, your scholarship checks, your paychecks. After you cover your basic expenses, think about putting a little bit aside for the next semester or for an emergency expense. And we'll talk a little bit about scholarships. So there are two main types of scholarships. There are merit scholarships that'll look at things like your GPA, organizations you've been involved in, basically all of your accomplishments. And there are need-based scholarships that'll look at your FAFSA information and that EFC number. And some scholarships will look at a combination of both. You'll want to look for scholarship announcements from local organizations, local businesses, banks, high schools, employers, athletic conferences, and start now. A lot of scholarships are awarded during the spring semester. So I know State Employees Credit Union has a scholarship every year. I've seen scholarships from Wells Fargo. If any of you work in fast food, I've seen scholarships come through from Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Burger King. If any of you play sports, your school's booster club may have scholarships, or the North Carolina High School Athletic Association usually has a few scholarships. So you'll just want to keep your eyes open for those. Visit your college financial aid websites to see if separate scholarship applications are required. Some may award based on your admissions application and your FAFSA, but some schools may have a separate application, like UNCW has a separate scholarship application each year that closes in March. So visit your financial aid websites to see if there are any other deadlines. Visit websites such as cfnc.org and fastweb.com to search for private scholarships. And take advantage of free resources. You don't want to pay to view information or to apply outside of something like the CSS profile, for example. And I'll share a few scholarship application tips. You should note your award deadlines and requirements. Ask early for letters of recommendation. Your teachers have a lot going on right now, so the sooner you can get on their radar, the better. And sometimes they can make those recommendation letters generic enough where you can use the same letter for multiple scholarships. Do not overlook scholarships with smaller amounts. So every scholarship may not be $20,000, but you can get a $5,000 scholarship here, a $1,000 scholarship there, get a few others, and they can add up to be just as valuable as the larger ones. Take time to craft your essays, draft, edit, and revise. You want to give the readers a good idea of who you are. And be mindful of what you post online. I have seen that students had admissions offers taken away or scholarships taken away because of something they posted on social media. So you just want to be careful of what you put out there for the world to see. Note all of your accomplishments, your grades, activities, community service, employment, all of that matters. And check your application for completion before submitting. You don't want to lose a scholarship opportunity because a transcript was missing or an essay was missing, or you were missing a recommendation letter, for example. And apply often. You may receive every single scholarship you apply for. You may receive some of the scholarships you apply for, but just keep going. There are always scholarship opportunities available out there for you. Okay, that was the bulk of my presentation. I know I covered a lot of information in a short period of time, so I'm happy to share these slides with you so you will have these resources available.
Thank you, Jenna. While you were presenting, we did have 2 questions that came through the chat, so I wanted to make sure we address those first. The first question is it too early for a second semester junior to apply?
For the FAFSA, yes, you would want to apply your senior year. So when the new FAFSA opens in October, you would complete the FAFSA at that point because it's for the next academic year. So if you were to complete the FAFSA that's out there now, you would still, I guess, be a senior in the fall when those award letters would be processed. So you'll just want to keep an eye out for the new FAFSA that opens in October.
Great, thank you. Another question that came through, if I have a foster son, does he have to file as independent?
Unless, it really depends on the circumstances, but unless you legally adopted him, he wouldn't have to include your information. But once you're completing the FAFSA, it'll ask a few questions about that situation, and it'll determine if they'll need the parent's information or not. But usually for foster children, unless you've adopted them, they wouldn't be dependent.
Great, thank you. The next question, my son's father and I share equal custody. Will I have to provide both parents' tax docs, or only will one parent be sufficient?
Usually one parent will be sufficient unless one of you remarried. So you'd want to include the information for the parents he lived with more or whoever provided more financial support.
Thank you. The next question, when should high school juniors begin applying for scholarships?
You can keep an eye out for scholarships that juniors may qualify for. Occasionally, some may award scholarships to juniors, but usually you should start, I'd say, August or September of your senior year. Some scholarships do start awarding in the fall, like I know Coca-Cola had a big scholarship at one point that they'd start recruiting for in the fall. So I'd say in the summer, early fall, start keeping an eye out for scholarships, and definitely that following spring semester is when the bulk of scholarships will be awarded.
Hello, I have a quick question. I was the one that asked the question about the custody. So my son's father and I share custody. I am remarried.
Okay.
How would that change things?
If you are remarried, if he was to provide your information, you would need to provide your spouse's information as well. So you would provide your spouse's information and wouldn't include his father's information. But if he were to file using his father's income information, if he's not remarried, only his information would be needed.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I would like to know how the student's income, if there's a part-time job, how that affects the award letter or the FAFSA.
If the student has a part-time job, if they were working in 2019, for example, for this year, they would need to include that income information on the FAFSA. So if they have W-2s or Schedule Cs or 1099, any records of income for that job, they will be asked to enter that on the FAFSA. But it may not necessarily change the award letter drastically if they were working.
In reference to banking account information, you said we'll have to provide our savings and checking. As that typically fluctuates, how would that affect the award letter? Because today you might have a lot of money, tomorrow it might change. How does that affect the award letter?
Right. I would include the balances at the time that you file. And if there was a drastic change in income, for example, or in those accounts, at that point, you'd want to begin the special circumstances process with the school, and they may ask for records of those changes and occasionally a short form you'd have to fill out, but they can recalculate your award letter at that point.
For the person who asked about the requirements for their foster son, there are significant resources for foster youth preparing to go off to college. So if you're connected with an agency, please make sure you speak with your social worker about it. If not, I'm happy to help you with that one-on-one as well.
Thank you. I have been in touch with the social worker, so I'm aware of all the money that in North Carolina, especially available for in-state students. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Jenna, we have another question in the chat. How does a parent bankruptcy impact student FAFSA status?
Right. If your parent was to file bankruptcy or again, the income drastically changes, I would follow up with the school for special circumstances information. They may ask you to provide maybe a copy of that bankruptcy letter. And again, they can recalculate your aid letter at that point.
Another question. When I went to college, I was covered fully by financial aid, nothing out of pocket. I noticed now a lot of my friends that their kids are in school, they're having a balance. It sounds like $5,000 or $2,000 is kind of the common amount I'm hearing. Is that kind of the new process where it's not fully covered anymore and parents do have to take out of their pockets? I'm curious.
I think it really depends on the school. some schools like UNC or NC State, they have the resources to meet full need. So whatever your financial need is on your award letter, they can cover that amount. So some schools can provide full rides. Other schools may not have as many resources. So you may have to be covered by federal funds or state funds. But at that point, when the award letters are generated, you can kind of get an idea of how much each school is able to provide and kind of calculate your balance from there. And you'll be able to find the best option for you.
I'm not sure if this question was asked, but some parents and students may want to know, I'm going to college, I fill out the FAFSA. Do I just do it that one time and that's it? Could you talk more about that?
Mm-hmm. You will need to complete the FAFSA each year that you're in school. So you'll complete it now for your freshman year. In October, when it opens again, you'll need to complete it for your sophomore year. When your junior year rolls around, you'll need to complete it again. I did interact with some students who said, oh no, where's my financial aid? My bill's out, nothing's there. But when we checked, we realized they didn't complete the new FAFSA for the following year. So you don't want to be in that situation. Just keep in mind October 1st, set your reminder, you will need to complete the FAFSA again.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have about 15 minutes left. So if you do have additional questions, feel free to come off mute and ask them, or you can type them in the chat.
And I can share my contact information as well. I know everybody might not want to ask a question in front of the group. So if you want to reach out privately about any questions, I can share my information.
Hi, Jenna. There's another question. If students receive financial aid from their schools, but they also receive private outside scholarships, does that affect their financial aid award?
It does. So you can't have a financial aid package that exceeds the calculated cost of attendance for the year. So if your school's cost of attendance, again, that $25,000 example, if all of your aid kind of adds up, they won't let you go over 25,000. So usually that means that your loans will be reduced to make room for your scholarships, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But sometimes you may see adjustments in your aid package because you can't go over that cost of attendance limit. And that's a federal requirement.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question
Okay.
regarding, so if the student is going to be attending Wake Tech, let's say, versus a 4-year university right away, and is unsure if they're going to have housing as well. So we're not really sure if I want them to leave the house and get an apartment for the first semester or just stay home. I know that when I'm filling out the FAFSA, it does ask about, if they'll need housing. Should you say you're going to need housing and then retract it later so you can know what that final funding is?
Usually they'll keep your cost of attendance budget the same, whether you're living on campus or off campus. A lot of people do reach out about that question, but they'll still keep your cost of attendance the same with the estimated housing costs factored in. It wouldn't necessarily impact the award amounts.
Okay.
Hi, Jenna. There's another question. What is the appeal process if we don't get enough financial aid for our student?
At that point, you can reach out to your schools to see what other options are available. Again, that special circumstances form, you may want to fill that out to see if there's anything you can do at that point. Give them any documentation they may need. And at that point, they'll have to exercise professional judgment to let you know if there's anything else that they can provide. And
Thank you.
sometimes, while I'm thinking about it, sometimes when you apply for aid, your school may not have institutional funds available, but later on they may add more money to your package as other students decide not to attend or decline their aid packages. You may be awarded additional money later. And I can take a few more questions if anyone has any others. Okay, and if no one else has any questions, I will turn it back over to Marquita.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenna. And thank you to all of you all that have participated in our hashtag CAP Financial Aid Basics session. I'm Marquita Brazier, and I am the chair of the CAP committee. So again, we thank you for joining us and taking part in this. If you do have a question, additional questions, you can always email us. And I wanted to take a moment to share my screen if I can get that access to show you the dates for our next events so you can join us for those. Just to give you a heads up, our next event is going to be March 6th. We're going to have a college panel, representatives from different colleges across the country. We'll have representation from in-state public, out-of-state public institutions, private institutions, and an HBCU. And an exciting announcement, one of the colleges that will be joining us next month has agreed to waive the college application fees for all students that attend our next session. So if you are interested, stay tuned to our social media. Make sure you fill out the attendance form so you can get on our email list. We'll send you an update about that. And you can join us next month, March 6th at 1 p.m. And for your student, or if you're the student, for you to find out what college will waive the application fee. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you have a great day.
Thank you.
Marquita,
Yes.
I think someone asked a question about how to enroll in CAP. Did you address that?
No, I did not. So if you fill out the attendance form today, just let us know that you're interested in CAP and we can get that information out to you. And we have everyone's email addresses that did register, so we'll be sending you information via email as well. Thank you. Would we be able to post the attendance sheet again in the chat for